All right, let's dive deep into the Sermon on the Mount. But with a bit of a twist this time, we're going to be looking at it through the lens of Aramaic, which, as you know, was the language that Jesus most likely spoke. And helping us unlock some of the hidden depths, we have Andre Wubarak. He's an Aramaic-speaking Christian teacher and tour guide based in Jerusalem, and really brings the Aramaic roots of the Christian faith to life. If you want to find out more about his work, you can check out his website at www.twinsbiblicalacademy.com.
It's a pleasure to be here. You know, so many of us encounter the Bible through translations, but when we go back to that source, the original Aramaic, it's amazing what we can uncover.
Yeah, that's what I'm excited about. So let's set the stage for our listeners. Why is understanding the Aramaic context of the Sermon on the Mount so important? What can we expect to discover?
Well, imagine hearing Jesus speak in his everyday language, with all the nuances and cultural richness. Aramaic uses poetic parallelism, vivid imagery, and repetition in ways that can deepen our understanding. Even the most familiar passages.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Give me an example of how this plays out in the Sermon on the Mount.
All right, let's take the Beatitudes, starting with the word blessed. In Aramaic, the word thought to be used here is ohun. It translates to blessed or happy, of course. But it also carries the sense of divine favor and deep inner peace.
Ohun. Wow, it sounds so different. I can almost feel the weight of that word. So it's not just about fleeting happiness. There's a more profound sense of well-being connected to God's presence.
Exactly, and that's just the beginning. Think about the phrase poor in spirit. The Aramaic's equivalent, miskena brua, goes beyond material poverty. It points to a spiritual humility, a dependence on God, similar to the Hebrew concept of the anoim, those who are oppressed and rely on divine mercy.
So it's not just about a lack of money, but a lack of ego, a willingness to surrender to something greater than ourselves. That changes how I understand that beatitude entirely. What about the word meek? Does Aramaic shed new light on that one too?
Absolutely. The Aramaic mikiki goes beyond mere mildness. It suggests gentleness, humility, and self-control, but also a teachability, a willingness to submit to God's will. It aligns with a broader Near Eastern understanding of spiritual virtue, where strength comes from surrender.
It's fascinating how these Aramaic nuances add layers of meaning that we might miss otherwise. And it makes me wonder, how does this understanding of meekness affect how we live out that beatitude? Is it about passive acceptance, or is there a kind of active strength involved?
That's a great question, and it's something we can explore further as we delve deeper into the Sermon on the Mount.
One of the things that has always intrigued me is Jesus' statement about fulfilling the law, not abolishing it. It feels so radical, and yet so foundational to his message. How does the Aramaic perspective illuminate this idea?
This is where things get really interesting. The Aramaic term mamli means to complete, or to bring to fullness. So instead of dismissing the law, Jesus is actually emphasizing its true purpose and potential.
So it's not about throwing out the rule book. It's more about taking it to a whole new level.
Exactly. For Aramaic-speaking Jews, this wouldn't have sounded like a rejection of the Torah at all, but rather a call to live it out in a deeper, more transformative way.
I can see how that would have resonated with his audience. You know, he's calling them to go beyond the letter of the law to its spirit, to embody the values of justice, mercy, and humility that the prophets had always emphasized.
And you see this emphasis on inner transformation throughout Sermon on the Mount. It's not just about external action, but about cultivating a certain way of being in the world.
Right. It's like he's saying, don't just follow the rules blindly. Let them shape your heart and your whole approach to life. And that brings us to some of the other powerful images in the Sermon on the Mount. Salt, light, the kingdom. These metaphors feel so universal. But I'm curious, what can Aramaic tell us about how they would have been understood in Jesus' time?
Let's start with salt of the earth in Aramaic. Mela, the word for salt, doesn't just refer to flavor or preservation. It's also closely tied to the concept of covenant.
So there's this added layer of meaning, connecting salt to the sacred bond between God and humanity. So that makes the disciples salt, in the sense of preserving and upholding that covenant.
Precisely. They are called to embody the values of that covenant and to bring its blessings to the world.
And what about light of the world? I imagine that one has some interesting Aramaic connotations as well.
The Aramaic word for light, nura, is often used to symbolize divine presence, wisdom, and guidance. So it's not just about illuminating the darkness, but about radiating God's presence and wisdom into the world.
So it's not just about being a good example, but about becoming a conduit for something much greater. Reflecting God's light in everything you do, I'm seeing these familiar phrases in a whole new way.
And that's the power of looking at them through an Aramaic lens.
Now, there's one more big one I want to touch on, the kingdom. It's such a central theme in the Sermon on the Mount, but I get the sense that it's often misunderstood. How does Aramaic help us to grasp what Jesus really meant?
The Aramaic word, malkua, doesn't simply refer to a physical place or a political entity. It encompasses a much broader idea of God's sovereign rule, both now and in the future.
So it's not just about a place you go after you die, but about God's reign over all of creation, his ultimate authority and power, but also his presence here and now, transforming our lives and our communities.
Exactly. And that's a concept that would have held incredible weight for Jesus's audience, many of whom were living under Roman oppression. The idea of God's kingdom would have been a source of profound hope and liberation.
It's a reminder that the Sermon on the Mount wasn't just a set of abstract teachings. It was a message deeply rooted in the social and political realities of the time, offering a radical vision of a different way to live.
And by understanding that historical context, we can better grasp the urgency and relevance of Jesus's message for our own lives today.
I'm so struck by how much richer these teachings become when we consider their Aramaic roots. It's like we're rediscovering them for the first time. It really does feel like that, like looking at a familiar landscape and suddenly all the colors are more vivid, so much depth and nuance that we might miss if we only focus on the translation.
It's true, and it makes you realize how much is at stake in language. Even with the best intentions, things can get lost or misinterpreted along the way.
So as we wrap up our deep dive, what are some of the key takeaways that you hope our listeners will walk away with? What's the essence of what we've been exploring?
Well, first, I hope this has sparked a curiosity about the Aramaic language itself. It's not just a historical relic. It's a window into a whole way of thinking and experiencing the world. And it can shed light on some of the most profound spiritual truths.
I have to admit, I'm definitely more intrigued by Aramaic now than I was before. Like we've been given a new set of lenses to look through.
Exactly. And along with that, I hope our listener is inspired to dig deeper into the cultural and historical context of the Bible. The more we understand the world in which these texts were written, the more they come alive for us.
Yeah, like we're time travelers, going back to the source, experiencing these teachings in their original setting. And that brings us to the Sermon on the Mount itself. It's not just a list of rules, but a call to a radical transformation.
Absolutely. It's a challenge to embody the values of God's kingdom, to be salt and light in the world, to live out the true meaning of blessed. And while that might seem daunting, it's also a message of hope and liberation.
It's a call to live differently, to see the world differently, and to let those values shape everything we do. This deep dive has given me so much to think about. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us.
It's been a pleasure. I always enjoy exploring these Aramaic insights and seeing how they can spark new understanding.
And to our listener, I hope this deep dive has left you with a sense of wonder and a desire to keep exploring the depths of Scripture. Remember, even the most familiar passages can reveal new layers of meaning when we approach them with an open mind and a heart ready to learn.
And if you're eager to continue this journey into the Aramaic roots of the Christian faith, I encourage you to check out Andre Mubarak's website, www.twinsbiblicalacademy.com. You'll find a wealth of resources and insights there.
So here's a final thought to ponder as we wrap up. If language can have such a profound impact on how we understand a message, what other cultural or historical contexts might we be missing? When we engage with Scripture, keep asking questions, keep digging deeper, and you might be surprised at what you discover.